okay, what am I going to do now? And he always said, well, look around and see what's there. And then the door just opened up for me. So that's what we're going to do today, is visit with the 3 mission trips I've been on, one to Nigeria, one to Haiti, and one to Guatemala. Now, I went to Nigeria right after their okay, Jane. Something happened. Oh, she's fixing that. What am I going to do? Okay, I had a job here in town. I quit my job. I went to wall camp and became the nurse for the summer. I did that for 2 summers. After the second summer, the director said, what are you going to do now? And I said, I don't know. Well, what do you want to do? I don't know. And he said, well, you got to do something. And I said, yeah, that's true. So I said, oh, why don't I go to Africa or something like that? And he said, are you serious? And I said, sure, why not? So he dialed a number on the telephone and talked to someone at the other end for a little bit. And then he said, get on the extension. Dr. Bully would like to talk with you. And I said, okay. So I got on the extension and he started talking and said, I hear you're interested in going to Africa. We have a position. It's the Biafran war is going on and we need nurses. So I said, oh, why not? And he said, can you come to St. Louis and we can have an interview and get you signed up? I said, oh, sure. So when I hung up the phone, I told the director I would not be at work the next day for camp, that I was going to be going to St. Louis. And it's only a 4-hour drive from where we were, so I could do it in one day. So I went to St. Louis, found out more about Nigeria than I ever even knew where Nigeria was. Signed a lot of papers, signed up for a visa, a passport, where were they going to send my money, just all kinds of papers. And one of the nurses was there that was working in Nigeria. So I went to lunch with her. She told me a little bit more about Nigeria. And I said, oh, well, why not? What else is there to do? There's got to be more to this world than Berkshire, Illinois. So there is, believe me. So here I am. Whoops, went a little bit too far. Went to Nigeria. If you look here, Nigeria is just right there in the curve of Africa. Our medical center was here, which is in the middle of this state here. So everything that's happening now that you hear about is happening up in this part of the country. We were down here in this part of the country. So we're a little bit farther away from this. Now, when I was going through my speech yesterday, it only took me 3 hours, but I promise I won't get you here 3 hours, okay? So I have reduced it a little bit. Okay. I arrived in Nigeria 2 weeks after the Biafran War finished. So most of the work that I did for the first 6 months was rehabilitation work in different areas that we were, where the war was, doing nutritional centers, going out and restocking dispensaries and that type of work. After 6 months, I was then sent to,
We're fine yesterday.
I'm sitting too close to you.
that's how you describe the area that you were going to.
Hit the enter button. Do you remember which one that is on the thing? There you go.
Okay.
We may use that instead.
When I got there, Dr. Bowley was there. He's the doctor that I talked to who was head of medical missions with LCMS at that time and hired me. I appreciated it very much. Okay. This is Emmanuel Medical Center. It's a set of buildings that, there's 6 buildings there. There's connected by verandas so that in our 6 months of rain, you can go from one building to the other without getting wet. 6 months of dry, you can go from one building to the other without getting sunburns. If you look at the center, the first building here is where patients registered and where we had the clinic. The second set of buildings is where the pharmacy was and where the offices are for the medical staff. Behind these buildings, there was a maternity ward, and there was a place where we drew blood and that type of thing. Also, there was, I can't get used to that. Okay. There were this is not working like it did yesterday.
Sorry.
It's all good. Okay. There were also 2 metal sheds behind the clinic where when we had children who needed to stay for extra care because they had diseases, then they would stay in these 2 huts that we had. In between the 2 huts are the cooking facilities that the mother had to bring her own food, her own everything that she needed to take care of her child while they were at the clinic. We didn't provide any of that other than a shelter for the kids to go to. At our clinic, we didn't have a parking lot. We had a bicycle lot because everybody brought their families on bicycles. You would have a family of 5 or 6 coming on one bicycle. The father would be pedaling, the mother would be sitting behind him. She would have one baby on her back, she would be holding a child on her lap, and then another child on the handlebars, and maybe 2 children on the handlebars, depending on how big the family was. When I first arrived, because of the war, the lack of food, we had lots of children who came in with kwashiorkor. That is, they were able to get carbohydrate foods, but they were not able to get protein foods. You need protein in your body in order to survive. These kids did not get the protein food. They would come in very sad. As you can see here, there's sores on their legs, they're anemic, they're running fevers, just in really bad shape. What you would look for in these kids after they'd been in our clinic for a couple of days, they would start smiling, and you knew they were going to survive because they came in so sick, you really didn't know which ones were going to live or not. This child came in, his hemoglobin was about 10. So he had a couple of little red blood cells running around in his body. After his treatment and everything, he was a totally different child. What did we do to get rid of the swelling and everything? They got powdered milk that was mixed with palm oil, high in protein, high in calories. The palm oil also high in vitamin A, which helped to keep their eyes from being destroyed. They would get this food, this milk 3 times a day, and then in the middle of the night. If they didn't get it in the middle of the night, their blood sugar dropped too low and they would die. So we had to make sure that they were getting this milk 3 times a day, 4 times a day. Also, they were given this mixture of corn, soya, and milk. It's a powder that came in bags from the United States, high in protein. You cooked it like you would oatmeal. We fed it to the kids as long as we had it, but because the war was over, the food stopped coming. So once it was gone, it was gone. But they were getting their milk, which is what was the important thing. This is one of the happy babies. This baby is under a year old, so it's still being breastfed. And that's why these kids look so much better than a 2-year-old or above. All these kids receive malaria medicine because malaria is very popular over there. That's a good word to use. They would get iron, liquid iron. They would get vitamins. Once they were a little bit better, we gave them worm medicine because they all had worms. And you just treated the symptoms that you saw that they might have. The mother would bring her own cooking pots. She had to go out and find her own wood for the fire, or someone from the village would bring her firewood and food when they would come to visit the child. There was also our staff that would be teaching the mothers, these are the foods that you need to be feeding your child. Foods that are high in protein, because the kids really needed that right now. The foods that were taboo was, we can't feed our kids eggs. You can't feed our kids meat because they'll grow up to be thieves. Now that was the taboo back when we were there in the 70s. That's completely changed now, and they are feeding their kids eggs and meat. And another popular food was peanuts, because peanuts are also high in protein and fat. So they were getting more nutrition than what they had been during the war. It's not unusual to see a mother or a child, if they can catch a grasshopper, fixing it for their meal. They would put it on a stick or something, put it in the fire. They would look at it. Not done yet. Put it back in the fire and take it out and look at it. And I saw a 5-year-old pop it in his mouth and eat it. Now, did I eat a grasshopper? No. Grasshopper. But it's high in protein, high in fat. They needed that type of food. This is one of our vehicles that we had that we transported ourselves back and forth. It was used to transport sick people that we couldn't take care of. For example, a woman who was having a difficult delivery, they would have to go to Agoja, which is a half-hour drive from where we live. So we had a VW bus that would transport patients for us. Every year, there was always an outbreak of measles. Whenever that happened, and we had 2 or 3 cases that came in, they were usually from the same village area. So our staff who spoke the go to the village and talk to the chief of the village and say, this is what's happening in your area. We would like to come out and do a mass immunization of kids with the measles vaccine. They were always very cooperative in doing that. Where are we going to put all these people? We're going to put them underneath a tree, because that's where you can see hundreds of people in one day and get them all vaccinated. So the village would provide tables for us to put our items on, and then we were able to set up for the clinic. We used jet guns. We didn't use needle and syringes. Jet guns, we could get a bottle of vaccine that would take care of 50 people at a time, or 100, depending on how big the vaccine, the bottle was, the dosage. You can tell this child is just really excited that he wants to get his vaccination. But you have to make sure you held there very still because of the pressure that's put on to get the vaccine in. If the child's not holding still, you could cut them, and you didn't want to do that. So you made sure that you held the child as still as possible. This is a better picture of what the jet gun looks like. You can see on the ground, there's a pedal there that you had to press, and that loaded the gun so that it was ready for the next person. So you just have an assembly line going as to, getting everybody done. Usually when we showed up for a clinic, there might be half a dozen people there, and we were going, oh, that's not very many. But by the time we got everything set up, you could see in this previous picture the line that went way beyond. They didn't take people long to get there. Once they knew you were there and that you were coming, they were there with their kids, ready to be seen. We also had a problem with tuberculosis, and this TB can be cured. They had to take their medicine for 18 months. Let's see if I can get this to work. This is Pius. He was a dispenser. He had gone to school it was either 9 months to a year to learn diagnosing and treatment and what medications and how to do clinics. So he was in charge of our TB village. Simon and Simeon were his helpers. And I'll go into that a little bit more to explain what that means. People in the villages didn't have covered wells. They didn't have their latrines in the right places. There were many, many things about a village that Dr. Goli said, we need to make a model village. So that's what we did. With Weebridge money and the LWML monies, we were able to build a TB village. It had a center place where the meetings were held, where they gave out the medications every single day so that we knew that the patients were getting their medicine. And then we had 8 buildings around with 2 rooms in each building. So there was room for 16 TB patients all at one time. And we had 16 TB patients all the time with people waiting to get in because of TB being so rampant. Here you can see the well, and back over here then were the latrines. So this was to teach the people what was important in their village. How can we cut down on diseases like diarrhea? Oh, tell me about it. Whenever there was a mother there, she also had her kids with her because soon the village was going to take care of them. The husband couldn't take care of them, so the kids always came in with the mother. So even though we had 16 patients, we may have 20, 30 people that are in the village. They had to bring everything with them, their own food, their own mats, their own firewood, everything that they would need, they had to bring with them because we did not provide any of those items. And you can see there's several men that had TB that were in the village at that particular time. Here's one of them using the pump, which they all loved because the water was right there. They didn't have to walk to the river and fill up a bucket and come back. We also had this lady. She came in, she was nothing but skin and bone, the sickest person I have ever seen in my whole life. She had TB. She was there for 3 months in our clinic in the village, and this is what she looked like when she left. I'm sorry I don't have a picture before, but we didn't take pictures before. She went back to her village and they had a big party because they did not think she would ever come back alive. So our village was very, very successful. Now there are people that came to our village who had gone to market, got the medicine for TB, took it for a couple weeks, their cough went away, they stopped taking the medicine. Their cough started up again a month later, they went to the market, bought the same medicine, took it for a couple weeks, and their cough went away, so they were cured. No, they were not cured. They built up resistance to the medicine, and when they came and stayed 6 weeks in our village and did not get any better, there was nothing else we could do for them except tell them they had to go back to their village. There was nothing we could do, which was very sad to have to tell people, we can't do anything for you. Also, the other thing that I forgot to mention was before they did their clinics out in the village here, they always opened with prayer. All of our clinics, we always opened with prayer. And that was, God was there a lot of times watching over us because there were a lot of people that we didn't think were going to make it. This is our maternity board. We had 3 Nigerian midwives who worked with us at different times. And Koyo here was with us the whole time we were there. And she became, when we were asked to leave in 76, she was then the matron of the clinic. So she was very intelligent. She came to the States and did a course at Washington University and got better grades than what American nurses were getting at the university. So she was just wonderful, wonderful Christian woman. Since we had the TB village, they decided they would build a maternity village so that women who were having difficulty with their labor or who had premature babies, they could stay in this village while the baby was being treated. This was a 2-pound baby that survived. And this here was another 2-pound baby that survived. We had lots of babies that came in with tetanus because when they cut the cord, they used a rusty razor blade. If they got the babies into us within a day or 2 after they started showing symptoms, these babies survived. It took a month, but they usually survived. So it just depended on how soon can you get to the clinic to, get your treatment. This is in Koyo. These are some kids that were over in the huts that I showed you. And when they start feeling good and getting around, they come and they want to know, don't you have something for me? I need, whatever. So they cornered in Koyo this day, and she, of course, turned them away. But they were in the village. This is Lily, her father. He came to Sandy, who was the other nurse with me at Yahweh, and said that his daughter was very intelligent. She was very bright. She was very smart. And he wanted her to work at our clinic. Well, Okay, well, you don't just take someone who's lived in the village in the mud hut and have them start working in your clinic. So we took her and she worked in our house as our house girl until she had acquired the skills of knowing what good hygiene was and that type of thing. Afterwards, she went down, she worked at the clinic, caught on very quickly as to what she needed to do and what sick people are, what do you give them, that type of thing. After we left, we found out that she had gone to primary or secondary school, she went to college, and she became a doctor. So she came from nothing to a doctor. Very, very smart girl. We'll go to the market. This is cassava, which is one of the carbohydrate foods that they ate. This is crayfish. There was lots of crayfish around. They put that in their stews to add protein. There's tomatoes and other greens that you could buy. Okra, dried okra, fresh okra. This here these are the yams that they were well known for in Yahe. We would have yam festivals where big parties went. Here's palm oil, rice, salt. I'm not sure what's in these here, but anything you wanted, you could go to the market. We usually sent our houseboys because they knew what the price was for items we didn't know, and of course they would always charge us more than they would charge our houseboys. There was pineapple available. Some of pineapple was very tart, some of it was very sweet. These were really sweet. Oh, they were wonderful. Wonderful. Papaya, bananas. So all the kinds of fruits and vegetables that you wanted. There was a meat market, but I didn't want to show you that because you would see here. Okay, how do you get to market? Okay, there's over the creeks, there's, kind of nice bridges, and there are sort of nice bridges. She did not go across. We went back a couple weeks later, the bridge was not there. So that's how sturdy the bridge was for a little while anyway. What did you do when you had to go across either a river or a creek to get to your clinic? You hired someone who had a boat, and they would take you across. There's our staff going across to do some clinics with us. They're carrying our supplies, clinic supplies and stuff to be able to do a clinic. Another way to get to the market was to walk. Most women, that's how they got to the clinic. Well, I should say most, all women got to the clinic by walking and carrying a baby on their back, having yams on their head, and they probably walked 1 or 2 miles already before they got to the clinic. Some up to 5 miles before they got to the clinic or to the market. You would also see buses. Well, the loads on top of the bus are about as big as what the bus is. And many times, because the roads were so unsmooth, they would tip over. And there would be a big mess. We did have one that tipped over not too far from our clinic, and thank goodness I was out doing a clinic in the bush, but when I got back, there were people laying all over the ground in our clinic that had different injuries that they had. So we were sending our van that you saw filled with people to Ogoja to the hospital. We had another van that took people to another hospital that was down the road with another mission. It was probably another water in, or puts food in to keep it cold while it's in their hot huts that they had. Also, the roads in the rainy season are wet. That's Pius and Sandy on our motorcycle, and they did make it out of there. I don't think they got their feet too wet. So, but that's some of the things that we dealt with while we were there, was rainy season and dry season. Everybody here is a farmer. Is this how you clear your land? I don't think so, because we didn't have tractors and plows and discs and things. So they would burn the grass and everything. Hopefully the wind didn't start up all of a sudden, and many huts got burned because of the wind coming up and causing those types of problems. This land has been cleared. The farmer is out with his hoe, digging up the ground so that he can plant his yams. Now, this is what the yam heaps look like once they have dug up the ground and they plant their yams in there. The yams grow, and then they harvest them several months later. And that's when we get to, when they harvest them, that's when we had to cancel clinic so we could have a party. This is what the yams look like. They're big tubulars. They're very similar to our potato, but they're very different from our potato. You would not eat one of these raw, where you eat potatoes raw, but they cook them, they pound them, they make yam balls out of them. They're very, very good. They grow like it. School. The boys usually went to school, the girls did not go to school. What are they doing here? They're clearing the land around the school so they can have school. And during recess, they can go out and play soccer and that type of thing. They bring their machetes with them to school that day and clear the land. After they've finished with school, their classes and everything, then they are expected to go to the river and get the water for cooking and washing their dishes and taking their baths and that type of thing. So a lot of times these kids, when they get to the river, they'll take their bath and then fill up the containers, the buckets, and carry the water back to their village. So you can see why maybe there's a little bit of diarrhea going on here. We were on call 24/7, but one day we decided we were going to take some of our staff to the Ogadoo Cattle Ranch, which is about a 2-hour drive from where we lived, and it's up on a very high mountain. Here you can see the ranch is still 6 miles away, but its elevation is 24 feet up. So it's getting cooler there than what it was down where we lived. Oops. I'm going to look at that. Okay, I was driving. Voila. You can see the road down here going around. Well, that's the road we just came on. And I was just pointing it out to the guys in the van, and I said, oh, look down there. That's where we just came from. And this little voice from the back of the van said, Sister Ruth, would you just drive? So I said, yes, I will. It was a good day. This is a staff in front of the guest house there at the ranch. And I'm sitting down there with them. You can see Pius here with his hat and his coat on. Well, he worked for missionaries before, and they had come up to the cattle ranch. So he knew that it would get cool up there compared to what it was was at this end, she was at that end. In the middle was our dining area and our living area. And we had our own motorcycles, so that at night when there was an emergency down at the clinic, they would come up and get us, and we would ride our motorcycles down to the clinic, because the clinic was a fair distance, you know, maybe like from Park Road to where Pastor's house is, maybe a little bit farther away, maybe to the corner there. So it was a distance, and we were not, you know, when you wake up in the middle of the night, you're not really focused. So we were able to have motorcycles to take us there. And this is just another one of the houses on the compound that we lived in first, and then were moved from one house to the other depending on the situation at the time. This was our laundromat. We had a washing machine that had a motor on it, and so it had to have gasoline in order to run. Here we are on our motorcycles ready to take off for someplace. I'm not sure where we were going. But then Coyle was very, she was very futuristic, let's say. She was not afraid to get on a motorcycle and ride it, where a lot of other Nigerian women would have been. And it wasn't really the thing to do back in the 70s when we were there. This is our Passat that Sandy and I decided when we traveled, we didn't really like going on motorcycles because you couldn't carry too much stuff with you on it. But we couldn't. Nigerians could, but we couldn't. So we asked Trinity and her church if they would help us purchase this vehicle. And they were very gracious. And whatever wasn't raised, then Sandy and I filled in the rest of it. So we had a great transportation now. It wasn't in a bumpy Land Rover where you went over the road. It was a little bumpy, but not quite as bad. So we got our Passat. So Mom and Dad said, yeah, they would come to Nigeria. They wanted to come for a visit. And they would stay for a week. And I said, well, then you might not come, because that means you would be one day at our clinic, because it would take you the 3 days to get there to our clinic, and then it'll take 3 days to get back to the airport, so you'll be at our clinic for one day. So they decided, okay, we'll come for 3 weeks. Okay, that's fine. So they did. And Sandy and I wanted them to experience as much of Nigeria as what they could. Okay, so they arrived at the airport, no problem getting through customs. At the airport, we got into a taxi to go to where our car was, and Sandy said, look at your mother. And I did, and she had her hands like this. Her fingers were totally white. So we said, relax, Mother, everything's fine. Just because the taxi is weaving in and out of traffic, either fast or stopped, that's not a problem. Just because there's trying to avoid motorcycles, bicycles, pedestrians who are jaywalking, and animals that are running around, don't worry about it, it's okay. Finally relaxed a little bit. Okay, we're packing the car, and Dad sees this can in the trunk, and it's a gasoline container, 5-gallon. We call them jerry tins, British terminology. And he said, what's that in the trunk for? We said, well, it's got gasoline in it, and we're going to need it because gas stations are far and few between. He said, oh, okay. So then we got out of town. It was dark. We needed to stay someplace, so we stayed at a Nigerian guest house, government guest house. Mom gets up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, and she yells at Dad and says, there's cockroaches in here. And so, yeah, cockroaches come out at night. to be in bathrooms because that's a wet pool, wet area. Okay, she said, get all the luggage off the floor, get them on the bed, or on anything, just get them off the floor. So he did. That was the first thing Sandy and I heard about the next morning was, did you know there are cockroaches? And we said, oh, sorry, we didn't tell you about that. Okay, so now we need to go to government rest house. Okay, so what happens next? We have a flat tire. Okay, so we got to unload everything. Dad says, where's your spare? I don't know. Do you have a jack? I don't know. So they finally found the tire. They found the jack. He got the tire changed, and we were on our way. We drove a couple miles. Guess what? We ran out of gas. And he says, where's the funnel that we could pour the gas into the car? We don't have one. How are we going to get the gas in the car? Well, we had some newspaper, so we made a little funnel and poured the gas in. Okay, so that was part of our trip. Okay. So now we decided to take them to Donkari, which was a game reserve. This is the room that we stayed in, and Mother commented the next morning there were no cockroaches. So she was thrilled about that. We get on in a Land Rover and we go into the park area and see lots of, wild animals that you would normally see. And then we come across a herd of elephants. Well, they were poaching at that time, and so the elephants didn't like us there. So like on National Geographic, they tell you they put the babies in the middle, the teenagers, and then the mothers, and then the bulls afterwards. It was picture. If we would have had a movie camera, we could have taken a perfect picture of what happened. Well, then the two bulls, this guy here and this guy here, decided he was going to charge us. Well, as long as our driver revved the motor to the Land Rover, they stopped. But you can see by the dust over here, they started up when the Land Rover, when the revving stopped. So they would take a couple steps toward us, and then they'd rev the motor, and they would stop. And then they would stop. And they did this about 3 times. Well, they didn't get very close, but those elephants are really big. Really big. Okay, so we took off. We got out of everything there okay. And then we were on our way to Jos, where they were having a mission retreat. And that's where, that's another picture of the friendly elephants. That's where they had lots of flowers in Jos because it's cooler there than it was down where we are. And so Dad was out smelling the roses, or the flowers. And that's where Dr. Oswald Hoffman was there as the guest speaker for the missionaries at that time. Okay, so now we leave Jos after a couple days, and we're headed to Yahe. And being the typical tourist, we had to stop and take a picture of the anthills. And Dad is 6 feet tall, so you know how tall those anthills were. And that was a small one that we saw on the way. Okay, so traveling back, we missed our turnoff and ended up in a dry lake. And had to back up, go back, find the right road to get to Yahe. Okay, when we got to Yahe, one of the missionaries wanted Mom and Dad to come out to his place and meet the chief of the village there that he knew. And so, okay, we went out there and met the chief. And the chief asked Dad, what did he do for a living? And Dad said, well, he was a farmer. Oh, well, that was great because the chief had been a farmer also and owned farmland. And then he said, how many children do you have? And Dad said, we have 9 children. And the chief sort of took back, 9 children? well, how many sons do you have? And Dad said, 6. And the chief walked over to him, took his hand, shook it, and he said, you are a rich man. You have 6 sons. Now the 3 daughters didn't make it. But 6 sons. He walked over to Mom, got down on his hands and knees, and started bowing. You are a good wife. You make your husband 6 sons. He was just really, excited about that. Okay, then the day that they were ready to leave, we had a big party for them. There's Mom and Dad, and then Toya, that's me. Sandy's in there someplace. I don't know where she is, but anyway, that's most of our staff. I think a few of their friends showed up too because we were having food. So, that's just part of life. They leave, they go to Lagos and to get on the plane. Dad's looking out the window, the plane's ready to take off, and Dad says, our luggage is still on the tarmac. So, Gene Brokowski, who was the missionary that was with him, got him out of his seat, ran up to the cockpit, said, you can't leave, there's luggage out on the tarmac. So they finally got the luggage done in the plane, and they took off. They didn't have any other problems after that. So people always ask, what's the wildest animal you had around you? Well, this was the wildest animal, was our cat. It caused no problems to be a wild person. Okay. Then in 2011, we decided that we wanted to go back to Nigeria and see what changes there were. Now this is 40 years later, so everything is totally different. This is Bev, who was a teacher at Jos, which was where the missionary kids went. This is her sister-in-law, who also taught there. Myself, Sandy, and Chris, who I worked with. Ed and Wilma were living there at the time that we went back. We left. Now the capital is in Obuju, which is about 300 miles or a 10-hour drive from where we were. This is the missionary house that they were living in, that Mom and Dad visited the chief in. This is Sandy, Chris, and myself meeting with Josephine, who was 14 years old when we left. She went to secondary school, became a nurse, and became the matron of Emmanuel Medical Center when the time came that she was able to do that. Sandy's big thing project is babies have to have hats. So we took 1,000 hats with us to Nigeria to hand out to the midwives so that when they delivered, they were able to give all the babies a hat. This is Bob, Sandy's husband. He became our official dishwasher while we were there. You can see we had running water. Our house when we were there was set up very much like this. There's a filter for the water so that your water is not contaminated. Your gas stove, and you always had a kettle because you always needed hot water, and so that was our kitchen pretty much. They had chickens, they had eggs. They did not put in the refrigerator. As long as you don't put them in the refrigerator, they're okay. If you buy your eggs in the market, you want to make sure that you crack them in different bowls, because if you have 3 or 4 eggs and you can't crack another one, it might not be like those that might have a problem with them, like they're spoiled. That's what the yam looks like when it's cut up and ready to cook. This is their house girl who is pounding the yam to make it so that we could eat it. And here she has finished pounding it. Takes about 15-20 minutes of pounding like this to get it to an elastic consistency. Here she's stripping the greens for stew. They have the same type of fruits and vegetables that we had back then: cabbage, papaya, bananas, onions, greens, pineapple, mangoes, oranges, plantain, just the same thing. It's just that it's a little bit more plentiful now. Being 40 years later, things have gone back to normal. Here's one of the babies with its hat on. Sandy was so proud of that. And buying mangoes. This is what I call the Tupperware party. You could go to market and buy any type of containers. Here, close to the market was a covered well. The boys really like pumping the water because it made me feel man. You could buy any type of cloth. I brought some of the cloth that's over there on the table just to show you that it's always very colorful to go to the market and buy cloth. But you had to know what the prices were, because prices for us were different than prices for Nigerians, which was understandable. This little boy brought his chicken to the market to sell. If you couldn't find it in the market, now they had the grocery stores, which they had when we were there, but they were not furnished like this. You couldn't buy, and here you see that you got your Kellogg's cornflakes. Next door was the hairdresser salon that we didn't go to because they didn't know how to do our hair. So. Some of the roads were really good roads now. I mean, this was beautiful driving on those. And then we get out to the bush where we were, and you had sandy, muddy roads. We met these guys along the road. He had just killed this snake and was taking it to market to see if he could sell it. If not, he would take it home and they would eat it. Here's a cutting grass that they'll take and skin it and dry it to eat later. This is just to show you somebody on their motorcycle. Like I said, we didn't travel like that when we traveled. But they're going to market to sell their goods. The women are walking and carrying, things on their heads, babies on their back, and usually one or two other kids with them. See the big rock in the middle of the road, you had to drive around it. We're going into a little pothole, which literally almost was as deep as what our car was tall. So, in winter, when it's rainy season, those are fun to go through. You don't go through them. And Josephine, because the hospital was on strike, there were no clinics or anything going on at the hospital at the time. So Josephine decided she would set up across the street in this building and we would have our own clinic. So she was able to get the vaccine that she needed for the kids. Every child had their own medical record that they carried with them, saying what immunizations they had, what illnesses they had. These are the cute, healthy kids that were at the clinic at the time. Newborn. I got to take the blood pressure of pregnant women. Chris checked the pregnant women to see how they were doing. Oh, thank you. To see how they were doing and to make sure that everything was okay with them. There were 2 women there doing AIDS testing, and while we were there, there were several people that came in, and they all went back without having any problems. We did a session underneath a tree, and this man was there with his shirt on that he was so proud of. If you can read it, Virginia may be for lovers, but Pennsylvania has it, of course. Price was a dispenser who helped us with treatments. Augustine could speak 5 or more of the dialects in the area, so he was just a wonderful, wonderful Christian person. Both of them were. Augustine was so into his village that he would do anything to help his people, making sure that they were taken care of. The sign in front of the clinic now is Lutheran Hospital Yahe with modern mortuary services. Now, why they have a mortuary service there, we never could figure that out. It was supposed to. The government built this big gate and fence all the way around the clinic. We did not have a gate or a fence. People walked in. If you walk down the side there, the veranda, there's always it's covered so that in the summer, rainy season, you didn't get wet. So they signed in, and then they went to saw them in the clinic that was next to they signed in, and then they went to the next building to get their medicines. This is administration wing. Then you walked under the veranda. You went to the maternity ward. You see an incubator there. It doesn't work. If you have a baby that is premature, you put hot water bottles in with it to keep them warm. The mothers are there to breastfeed. They pump their breasts. We tube feed the babies. They did improve the maternity ward here where the mothers stayed. They put in mosquito nets and they put a couple fans on the ceiling. So when there's electricity, you have air flow. This is the delivery room. You can see the stirrups. That is not in very good shape, but they make them work. When they're having the clinic, the baby delivery, it's very clean, very sanitary. People do not get infections and that, even though it may look like they do. That's what the mortuary looked like. We still haven't figured out why it's there. They built a theater, that's the British terminology. It was an operating room, and they did mostly hernia repairs on men. They did do a few other types of surgeries, but very rarely. This was our house when we lived there. Somebody else lived in it now. This one fell apart because termites got into the wood. Here we are walking back to the TV village, which is no longer in use because the government didn't think it was proper that their people should live in mud huts when they were in the hospital. So they built a cement building for the TB patients. Thank goodness, and now, 40 years later, they only had one TB patient. So TB was on the down. This is Iboko, Oklahoma, where they now have a school for public health. We went there to do life-saving skills training for the staff who was, the students that were there. We had electricity there that day so they could hook up their computers and show slides. As you can see, this was the chapel. It's full. All the students showed up for this. Here, Bev is on the floor. She's the pregnant woman who's delivering. And this here student, I said, why don't you go down and be her husband? He said, okay. So he went down, and Sandy's explaining what they're doing, and he leans down to Bev and says, you're doing a good job. She thought that was really good. So that was. This is their library. Not like our library. I mean, we have hundreds of books. They have maybe 50. This is one of the classrooms. that's their mannequin that they practiced on. This here is Maria, who was one of our aides, who went to school, became a nurse, and eventually came over the public health nurses in the Agoja division. So she was very high up on the government level. We also attended the Lutheran Church of Nigeria. I couldn't find a picture of the church, but the son was there. So we attended the church. Now, church services here are normally 45 to 1 hour. Over there, they're 2 hours. So you're just there all the time. Okay, now we're going to go to Haiti. Went to Haiti to go knives and under much ministry. There, they were a non-profit, non-denominational organization, and their motto was, "Do you know how to keep poor people poor?" No, Benson, how could you keep poor people poor? Just give them everything they need. Don't ask them to give or do anything in return. That way they never learn on their own skills and capabilities. They will always be waiting for the next handout. So their theory was to not do that. They went in 2007 and started their mission at that time, Much Ministries. This here is Port-au-Prince, where we flew into, and then we went up to the Knives, which is where they were located. This is right after they had the big earthquake. So we saw all the tent cities, huge tent cities. We saw the graveyards where they had hundreds and hundreds of crosses, where they had mass buried people because there were so many people that died in that earthquake. We stayed in a house that used to be a nunnery. We had our beds with mosquito nets, and believe me, they were mosquitoes there. I took on the job of being the mosquito killer. We had this things that you could wave in the air, and they would zap, zap, zap. Well, I mean, it was zap, zap, zap. You could hear, if you moved those curtains, you had a couple hundred that would come out at a time. So they were there. Not only in the dining room, in our bedrooms, I've had my zapper with me. The only way we could get to the clinic from where we were staying was on a motorcycle. So they had to hire motorcycle drivers for us to take us to the clinic. And here we are, packed and ready to go. The part of the Knives that we went to was called Jubilee, and it was anything but looking like a Jubilee place to live. They had the mud huts or mud houses, and in 7 years they had 2 mass hurricanes that came through and destroyed the whole village, so they had to rebuild because they are at the sea level or a little bit below sea level, so all the water congregated there. This is the school that we used for teaching our class. This here, part over here, is the medical clinic that they had a couple of days a week. At the schools, the teachers teach English, they teach French, and they teach Haitian. So the kids have to be able to read and speak each one of those languages. And here, I'm lucky I can speak English. What we did was the home-based skill, life-saving skills that Sandy helped write with a couple of other midwives. This is Martha, who was doing her physician assistant program in Georgia and was very involved with the ministry and did some of her practicum in Haiti. Here again, we took hats with us to hand out to the midwives to use. We had the copies of what they were learning. Then we went through each of those with the group that we were teaching. This here is some of them as they were getting ready to go into the school to attend the class. Some of the midwives were already pregnant for themselves, but they also took the class. Here we've got the papers that were reading on the floor there so that they could all kind of see what we were teaching. I became the pregnant woman. Okay? You should have seen the eyes when I walked into that clinic pregnant like this. I mean, they all went, but I tried to act as pregnant as I could. So I was the guinea pig, okay, now I'm delivering my baby, which was a doll. And they're checking my stomach, my uterus and everything to make sure everything is okay. Here one of the students was checking me. Here again. This was one of the midwives who attached herself to me. I don't know why, but every place I went, there she was. And so she had to have her picture taken. I mean, she made sure she was going to have mine. We are going to have our picture taken. So, very nice lady. You saw the medical clinic that I said they did a medical clinic one day when we were there. They did the pregnant women's clinic. And here, this midwife was given some hats to give to her patients' babies when they were born. Kids came to the clinic. They were not always the healthiest looking kids, and they were not smiling a lot of the time. This is out of place. When we did the clinic, we also had the CPR models, and so they were each taking their turn blowing into a baby, blowing into an adult. After we were finished with the classes, then we had each of the students had to come up and explain one of the teaching pages that they were taught. Some of them did a pretty good job. Some of them, Here there were some men there. Okay, you're the husband. This is what's happening to your wife. What are you going to do to help her? This is the class that graduated from our life-saving schools. We also saw kids at the clinic. They were measured, they were weighed, they were grafted out on a card to know how far they were, if they were at the level that they should be. Here's where they're figuring that out. If they weren't, they were given this packet that's peanuts, peanut paste, and they were to give their kid 1 spoonful of that twice a day. And this should have lasted for one child, would have lasted for 2 weeks. Well, you saw those other kids that were there. Well, you can't tell me that they didn't get some of that. We also visited an orphanage. This orphanage, we did checkups on all the kids. There were 20 of them. This was after the earthquake. There were 20 kids who were orphans. The government came to this lady and said, you're well known. I have 20 kids. I need you to take care of them. Will you do that? So she said, am I going to turn down 20 kids who are orphans that have no place to go? She said no. So she took these 20 kids in. She was applied to the states for money, built a building for them, and is taking care of these 20 kids until they reach the level where they can be out on their own. This is another orphanage in the same area that a minister has. He has 50 kids. He's had some of them that are out in the village with families that are taking care of them, but the rest of them stay in his village there. They have their own school, their own teachers. This is another orphanage. These twins, the mother died at birth, so the father couldn't take care of them. He put them in this orphanage in Port-au-Prince until they're of the age when he can physically take care of them. Of course, on the way when we were leaving, guess what? We had a fun time. Okay. Now we're going to go to Guatemala with Most Ministry. This is Patty Ross. She was the president of LWML at the time. We arrived, we stayed in Guatemala City at this residence here where the church is. They had a rest house where they put people up that came to do mission trips. These are, this is Kathy, Patty, that's the minister who was also a doctor, so while we were doing clinic, he was also seeing patients. That's two people from Most Ministry, myself, Lori, Diane, and Sharon. And who's one of the, no, this is the district president. This is the minister from the church. The others are interpreters for us. Here we are out seeing the sights. I don't know why I put this picture in other than we ate stews a lot at the place with all different kinds of foods in them. We carried our own glasses with us to the clinic. Once you got to the clinic, you had to sort them out, and so that it was more, the clinic ran a little bit better at that time. You will see on the table over there, bracelets. Every child that came to the clinic with the mother or father received a bracelet, or they received a finger puppet. Pastor would open with prayer for the clinic. He would then distribute the puppets or a bracelet to the child, and he would explain what all the colors meant. And then he would have the kids repeat back to him what those colors meant. Anytime during the day we would say to these kids, okay, what does this mean? They could tell you. I mean, they were very quick learning what the colors meant and what they why they had them. After he had the prayer and did that, then they were registered. Everybody, name, address, and basic information like we do here. Then Lori checked everybody's eyes to see if they had cataracts or any other diseases of the eye. They have an interpreter asking, the patient what she felt her problems were and telling Lori. This was one of the little girls that came to the clinic. She was having trouble seeing. She went through the process, got her glasses and her eyeglass case. That's hard to say real fast. And she was just, she was around the clinic all day. She was just so happy that she now could see better. This is what Sharon is doing. They have this here item. There's lenses in each one of these, you hold it up to their eyes. Okay, how, is this good, is this bad? If they had problems with that, you flipped it over to the other side, a different prescription. Is this good for you, is this bad for you? And we had 8 sets of these to find out what prescription was best for that person. At one clinic they had, several years ago, they had a guy come in who was like 20/20 in one eye and 2400 in the other eye. They had a pair of glasses with the lens in the right place for this guy. Now, is that a God thing? That's a God thing. You just don't have that happen every place. So once we checked their eyes, we wrote it on a piece of paper. They went to the area where the glasses were, and here's Kathy searching for a pair of glasses for the patient. They get their glasses, and you can see this here area is full of people. It was a busy clinic. We usually saw approximately 100 people a day. One day we did 150 people. Okay, now when they get their glasses, they have a sheet of paper like this, and they have to be able to read on here what their glasses say. So you notice that they don't have alphabet or anything like we, or numbers and stuff like we do. They would put their hands whichever way, they could see. If they could see this way, but they couldn't see this way, then you went to the next line. If they could see this way, and this way, and this way, and this way, then we knew that's where what their prescription was going to be. So once they get their glasses, they go to the table where the glasses are cleaned, and they're given the eyeglass case. We went out to one of the villages, which was an hour-and-a-half drive away. We packed the van with all the glasses and everything else that we needed for the clinic. We ended up at a school. They didn't have school that day, so we had all this area, and thank goodness they had the tin up above, because it was very sunny that day, and that kept it a little bit cooler in there for us. We got everything set up with our prescription things, got the on the wall so that we could do the testing. And then we were waiting for people to come, and these 3 boys, of course, showed up. What are you doing? Why are you doing? What? Why? I can't see. Yes, I can see. No, I can't. No. So they were giving Patty a hard time, but she stood up to him. Here's Pastor doing the registration of the different clients. This is our interpreter who was pointing out the different things on the wall. We had an unusual visitor. We did not give him glasses. He slept through the whole clinic that was there from the time we arrived until we left. Didn't move. We go back to the clinic in Guatemala City. Here's Pastor. Every Wednesday he would have a class, a Bible study. He would have also a class especially for children a certain day of the week, in addition to doing his doctor duties. That was at the clinic too. He was not a person who had much time to himself. We took our own water purification system with us, so that the water we drank was only the water that was gone through the purification. Okay, we had the clinic, we had church, now we're a garage. So if he didn't put his car inside in the morning, he would not have tires, he would not have a motor, his car would be completely stripped. So every evening, after everything is over, he moves his car inside. And this is what it looks like when it's set up for church service. Here is the president of the Guatemala Lutheran Church district there. And that's the two people from Most Ministry, and that's Kathy visiting with him. Very nice guy, very nice guy. Where we stayed was in a building right next to them on their same compound. And this is the minister's wife who took care of us, made sure that we had food, made sure we had everything that we needed. She got up in the morning, cooked our breakfast, she cooked our suppers. She made sandwiches for us when we went out to clinics. This is their son, who was their interpreter. He was also a cook, he was also a cleaner, he was also taking care of kids